Hello, Space Junkies, and welcome to What a Piece of Junk, the Star Wars podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. I am your host, Scott Butman, and joining me to answer the perennial question of who are you is my original podcast co pilot, Mr. Derek Marsh. Derek, how's it going?
Oh, you had to feel bad for Syrril on that one.
I definitely did, but man, did I love the completion of his story arc. So
Yes.
bleak.
Yes, but then also happy Mother's Day out there to those
Yes.
mothers, whether they're through biological, through foster and adoption, whether it is a person or a fur baby, all the wonderful mothers out there, those that are with us or in whatever afterlife or underground world you believe in. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers.
Yes, happy Mother's Day out there. I do still love from, gosh, I think it was 4 years ago now. Carrie Fisher was on Twitter, and the StarWars.com official Twitter account put out a notice that said, Happy Mother's Day. And if you were in the Star Wars universe, who would be your mother? And Carrie Fisher replied, Natalie Portman, which is unequivocally correct. Anyway, speaking of unequivocally correct, we couldn't do this episode number 167 without my original Wookiee co-pilot, our very own Dave Filcloni, the gooey, chewy man of 1,000 nicknames, Mr. Miracle, Nathan Miracle. Nathan.
That's right. People think that technically correct is the best kind of correct, but actually unequivocally correct is the best kind of correct.
That's right. And Natalie Portman very much would be Carrie Fisher's mom in Star Wars, and is.
Inarguably.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're not here to talk about the late, great Carrie Fisher or even Natalie Portman, although we could kind of mention Naboo. But tonight, this episode of our podcast is focusing on Star Wars Andor Season 2, Episodes 7, 8, and 9. And those episodes were individually titled Messenger, Who Are You? And Welcome to the Rebellion. So, guys, we're going to jump right into it with our perennial 5 questions. And apparently my new favorite word is perennial. So, question number 1, what did you like best about these episodes, Derek?
So, obviously, there's a lot to digest here, right? I mean, a lot of people online have been claiming, this is, the best, episodes that we've had of Andor and all that stuff. Some people are really big fans of 8 or 9. Otherwise, I mean, I just enjoyed it all. Again, it was great stuff. I would say probably the one thing I liked the most about this one was it actually felt like there was some like actual real like consequences and tension. Because obviously, as we were joking before we started recording with Nathan and I, with what we're going to be doing in our prediction 5 question, we were saying like, the people that are going to live and survive, like we know essentially who has to kind of survive here, right? But the way that they specifically executed 7, 8, 9 with the story, wrapping up Gorman, everything that was going on. You obviously have the tension build up when Mon Mothma gives her speech and they have to escape. Like there was still some moments when it was like, oh, okay, like I'm not saying that they're going to die, but somebody could get well wounded. And we obviously got that even in episode 7 when Biggs is trying to heal Cassian, because it looks like he got a blaster burn off of something on his back. So, just overall, I thought this one, all 3, this nice story arc was well done. Really enjoyed it. And like I said, I actually had moments of tension, which, like I said, again, credit to Tony and Dan Gilroy for writing this, the execution of it, and the way that they did everything. I thought, like I said, at least I was sucked in, which there's been a couple of moments, especially in arc 1, to what Nathan mentioned, right? It kind of was some, I wouldn't say dull, but just kind of maybe some lulls in the way the things that were happening, that, I might have glanced down at my phone here or there, which normally I don't do with Star Wars stuff. I try to make sure I'm paying attention and stuff like that. But obviously the last arc and this arc specifically, I've been, definitely hooked. Haven't had the need to like look at my phone other than like looking at like, oh my goodness, I'm, binging all 3 and it's, way past my bedtime.
Yeah, we're getting on the dreaded 2 a.m. I'll never be able to do anything tomorrow. Yeah. All right, great. I echo a lot of your sentiments about how these particular episodes were just amazeballs. But of course, as a writer, the thing I liked most about this episode, well, actually, I guess it's a tie that are both relating to my writing propensity. First of all, Cassian finally had a alias that he was a journalist. So I love that we have journalists in Star Wars now, and officially we can say that Cassian was impersonating a guy from the mid rim. Although I guess impersonating is not quite the right word if this person doesn't really exist. He's portraying a journalist from the mid rim, which I love the idea that that's like Star Wars version of the suburbs. In my mind's eye, I envision like the planet that we saw in Skeleton Crew, where all the kids lived originally. Like that's the mid rim, even though I know that that planet was hidden and unknown. I think it was still in the mid rim if you knew where to look for it. But I also think of it as the kind of place where, well, kind of like Ferrix, where, there's a neighborhood. The cities are like cities, not like ghost towns like Mos Eisley on Tatooine or Ewok villages like on Endor. Not every particular settlement in Star Wars is some pirate haven or agricultural place like on Navarro in the Mandalorian, or so on and so forth. So yes, I love that Cassian was a mid-rim journalist. And then, of course, Mon Mothma's speech. I mean, it was just breathtaking. Such a great written piece that felt like quintessentially Star Wars as a manifesto of the rebellion against the Empire. So specifically the rebellion against the Empire, not just light side against dark side, not Old Republic versus Sith Empire, not Separatist and Republic, but absolutely the reason that we have to rebel against Palpatine's empire is laid out by Mon Mothma. And then also quintessential Star Wars, but yet feels like it could have been something that Gilroy and friends unearthed from a manuscript that Winston Churchill was going to use back in World War II, but was scrapped and never got actually recorded. It was just a masterpiece. So definitely my favorite part of the episode. One of my favorite Star Wars moments of all time. So yeah, I was on cloud nine after, episode 9. Nathan, what do you got?
Well, I loved all 3 episodes, but my favorite episode of these 3 was episode 8. It's the first episode that we've gotten in Andor where we don't leave a planet. We spend the entire episode on Gorman. So I loved getting that focus of saying, this is the most important thing right now. So this is what we're concentrating on. My favorite moment from that episode was one that I hadn't really thought about the impact of this, but we have these Imperial troopers who are these like fresh-faced cadets almost, fresh out of the academy. They barely know what they're doing, and we can see their faces. And that's not a normal thing in Star Wars, but I didn't really give it much thought until the stormtroopers showed up. And having the not so good troops, basically the beat cops, who are just kind of trying to keep the peace, really sets up when the stormtroopers show up. All of a sudden, oh gosh, they mean business. It's really well done to make us realize that the people that we normally think of as the chumps, the ones that our heroes are constantly outrunning, outwitting, shooting down, can't hit our heroes worth anything, even if they were, ordered to do so on the original Death Star, details.
Who's got time for actual remembering of the film?
Yeah, they have a reputation for always missing, for not being any good at their jobs. But somehow this show makes them intimidating when they show up. And they do the same thing with the TIE fighters, having them come in so low and close and having the reactions for everybody on Gorman really drives home that, what we're used to seeing in Star Wars is the exception. We're used to seeing our heroes, the really, really elite characters, taking on the best of the Empire, when in reality, those guys that we think of as chumps will absolutely wipe the floor with random people from Gorman.
Yeah, one of the things that was interesting about this is talking. It was mirroring modern day politics the past several years, whether you want to consider today and then prior to the last leadership, and even prior to that. I mean, just look at everything really post. I mean, they say this about the O.J. Simpson case and how much media attention that brought into the news world and everything after that. So but that's the exact reason you were mentioning why they were showing their faces is because it was part of the ploy, because they were all young,
Mhm.
right? And by putting a face to that, right, then when the media, the journalists, as Scott was talking about, were doing it, right, you could hear that where it's like, oh, this is a Gorman uprising and blah 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 in the meantime, but now you have a face to the good soldiers and the victim, those ones that are doing it, and the Gormans are so bad because they're young kids and all this stuff, right?
Because
So
our planet lost someone too, and we know because we saw our person get
yeah,
killed,
yeah.
Yeah.
which
So
we wouldn't have done if they were in the stormtrooper outfits.
correct. So that's exactly it, right? Because to your point, like we've always just known these faceless masks, right? And you don't really get to see the person behind it. For all we know, there could still be some clones out there at this
It's
point
true.
hiding behind it. I mean, if they did themselves well enough, they could hide behind that, right? But for the most part, right, they're just a nameless number, and they're just a soldier, part of the bureaucracy or whatever you want to, part of the dictatorship, however you want to look at the empire, or whether you want to look at them as the part of organizing the chaos, as some of the empire elitists think. So no, I'm with you. Like, I thought it was really well done. I mean, to be fair, we've had some of that, at least if you think about the Battle of Endor with the Navy tactician troopers and stuff like that,
Mhm.
right? Like, they didn't really necessarily always have that as it. But to your point, right, I thought it was really well done, and it was really an interesting side of the way they twisted it in. You have the big disgruntled, well, not disgruntled, but kind of the
Gruff.
leader, or the captain,
Yeah.
right, the old man, and he kind of
Yep.
knows what's going on, and he's just kind of like, okay. And then I love how it was either, who was it? Was it Dedra or was it Syrril who made the comment like, these are just kids? I think it was Dedra. Made the
Deidre said
comment.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, Deidre said that she was when they were unloading from the transport after they had just arrived. They still had their rucksacks and everything.
yeah,
She
that's
was
right.
all like, "They're just kids. They get younger every day."
Yeah,
Which was another parallel to the real world, because you look at the Nazis near the end
yep.
of
World
the
War II.
World War
Yep.
II. The German troops were younger and younger men because they were running out of men. And today in Russia, the troops for Russia in the Ukraine are younger and younger because they're running out of
Yep.
soldier age people over there.
Well, and you even look at the
So
U.S. troopers too. I mean, how many they sent over that were just youngins? So
Well,
mhm.
it goes back even further than that. This is something that we talked about in one of my history classes
in
in
Civil War.
in college, Civil War. The people who were around at the end of the Civil War, the soldiers who were around who were older, mostly survived, and the people who got killed in most of the battles were the really young ones, the new ones, because the ones who had been around for a few years knew when you hear a sound over there, do not poke your head up to see what's going on because you will lose it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's always the young ones who die.
Yeah.
Experience
Uh,
counts.
well, it's like Patton said: the first rule of warfare is young men die. I think
Mhm.
that was Patton. I'll have to check on that quote, but I do know Patton was the one that said the goal of war is not to die for your country; it's to make the other guy die for his country.
Yeah. And if I can bring up a parallel to a fictional world, it reminded me of Avatar: The Last Airbender. The reason that Zuko gets banished from the Fire Kingdom is because he spoke out in a war council when one of the other generals was going to sacrifice a new, but I can't remember if it was a battalion or just a troop, some new soldiers. Like these are young kids
Mm-hmm.
who have they've just started their service, and he even says, what better temptation to offer our enemies than fresh meat.
That's my bad. Patton did not say the first rule of warfare is young men die. It was from the TV series MASH. Rule number one: young men die. Rule number two:
I should
doctors
have
can't
caught that.
change rule number
Doctors
one.
can't change rule number one. I should
Yeah,
have caught that.
I'm pretty sure that is from Henry.
That is, yeah, Henry Blake.
Yeah, The episode is Sometimes You Hear the Bullet from MASH, Season 1, Episode 17. Anyways, but
if I
yes, you
recall
get the
correctly,
idea.
I won't go too deep into that. I could talk about MASH for all day too.
We should do a MASH podcast at some point in the future. Anyway, all right, let's move on to question number 2. What did you like least about this episode, Derek? What was not really doing it for you?
I mean, there wasn't a ton. Again, this was great writing, great filmography or whatever you want to call it, right? The way they were doing it, good edit,
cinematography.
Right? Cinematography. Thank you. So, I'm glad I have an English major on my team here. So,
actually, I was a journalist major. Thank you very much. English was for people who don't want to write in the real world, but just think about writing. I'm sorry. No offense to my English major friends. I had plenty of
okay. Well, let's just say you have a very good vocabulary then.
Thank you.
He talked good.
I am appreciative of your compliments.
Yes. But I would say probably the only thing, and again, it goes back to my kind of my gripe that Nathan and I talked about last week, which is that these, I felt like we're a little bit robbed from these arcs because they could have been full seasons, right? Now, I do feel like this arc and last arc could have been just one solid season, right? Just like the whole Gorman thing and just played it all out instead of like drawing it out over 2 seasons. Because obviously, credit to them going back to, since we had the first arc into that, there was another year that passed by, right? So Syrril not only had 6 months, but then they had another 12 months in after that too, right? Between episode 6 and 7. So again, long haul, right? Like they talked about. But the only thing I think that, like I said, and again, I haven't watched this a second or a third time like I've done season 1 yet, which I know at some point I will. Just a lot going on right now because I was traveling last week, and so I didn't actually watch this until Thursday night after I got back because I wanted to watch it on a big screen versus watching it on my little phone. So I tried to, as best as I could, just like anytime I saw like something on Facebook or something, I tried to scroll by because not even like 12 hours after stuff airs anymore, like Star Wars itself or Disney's just already posting stuff. So
I saw a YouTube video breaking down these 3 episodes sooner than you could have watched all 3 episodes.
Yeah.
Because, of course, as if you listen to Rebel Force Radio or any of the other major brand name podcasts, if you will, there are lots of content producers out there that get the entirety of the season given to them like ahead of time.
Yeah,
so
there's a
it's
lot
just
of
like the day that it's going to be streamed, they go ahead and put up their content. And I'm like, guys, come on.
Yeah, it was like an hour and a half after drop time.
Yeah,
and they already had a breakdown of all 3 episodes. I'm like, the runtime of those 3 episodes, if you started at 9:00, would not be over.
Yeah. So
now, Nathan, that's if you watch them at one time speed. If you watched it at 2 or 3 times speed, then you could have done it.
But then, how did you catch everything to break it all down?
Yes, that's what your AI bot is for, is to catch everything for you. Yeah, I wish this was a joke. This is only 75% joke. Anyway.
Yeah. But anyways, the thing that I disliked about was that I just felt like there was a couple of small minor plot holes or things that just weren't closed out. And again, maybe they'll finish them up in 10, 11, and 12. But like it just felt weird, like the way Dedra, like obviously we see her break down after that, but we don't actually see her get to see Syrril. And it seemed like the way they were shooting it, or at least the way they edited it, it was like right after where he died in like an enclave in the shop. Like you wouldn't be able to see it from where she was still hiding, right? So like I would have liked to been able to, I would have been able to like to see that right afterwards. Obviously we got to see Will and his what's his new girlfriend's name?
Dina, I believe.
Dina. Okay, yeah, the Gorman girl, right? And some of the other people, like those two.
Sorry, Drina.
Drina. Thank you.
Reena.
So, but you know that they survived, but you still don't know, like the father or kind of the 2 main revolutionist guys, the ones that were 2 initially posing, and then the one that like you see them kind of both live, but then are they alive afterwards, right? Like. Because then, just those few little things of just like tidying up. Like, obviously we see Syril's mom cry at the end of the episode, right after the executions, and they're filming everything. And we obviously know what happens to Syrril already at that point, but just kind of just knowing it's like, okay, what's going on, those types of things. Like, it would have been cool, like if they actually would have done like a military thing like they do, where they come to your door, knock on you, and like, she actually, breaks down crying at that point, because you get a small couple of tears, but at this point you like kind of feel like, okay, she actually did care for her son, right? Like, it wasn't just a play on, right? So you got some good warmth there and stuff like that, knowing at the end. And again, that's how it plays into that ploy, right? That whole that we were talking about, the way the media and the government pulls and all that stuff that they're doing, or the Empire pulls, I should say, the way they're doing everything. So it's just those couple of like some minor things with the characters. Again, I get it. Like, they only had basically one episode, because the Gorman thing's happening in episode 8, and then you have episode 9 with then all the great stuff that's happening with Mon Mothma and everything at the Senate and Bail Organa and all this stuff, right? So like, it's like kind of like, again, where I wish I really would have had another episode, or like 10 to 15 minutes of just kind of filling out those kind of small things to just, again, bring it more home. Because again, it's so great, such great stuff, but you just feel like you're cut short a little bit to really fully be able to breathe it all in and make it just like how season 1, I felt like we had those moments of breathing, and the things that we've talked about, like, that I've really enjoyed about like the original trilogy, and to some degree the prequel trilogy, but not really the sequel trilogy, where you had those just moments of breathing and taking in the moment, and just the music playing, right? Like, we've had some of that with Andor, but it typically is like at the end of the episode where, something major happens and you got the great music that they're playing, and, they're trying to take that in, and you're just like, oh my goodness, that episode just blew me away, right? What's going to happen next? So I just, like I said, I feel, again, shorted on some stuff, and I just really wish they would have had a little bit more time to fill in, just like I said, just those little bit stream points. Like I said, I really would have really loved to see Dedra be able to see Syrril dead and get that breakdown, because like the whole interaction between them, right? Like, she's been such a strong female character, but then when like Syrril attacks her, right? Like all this stuff, like you really know that like you look at it from the outside, right? And I get it, right? I'm a guy too, so I don't know this, right? But you take real world things where, women are in abusive relationships, and to be fair, guys are in abusive relationships too, as well. And that the fact that, I mean, he was legit going to kill her, right? Like, I love that. Like, that was the point of Cyril's character arc, where like he was at that moment where he realized, like, oh my God, I've been playing the part of the bad guys this whole time. Yeah. Like, it finally hit him. Now, obviously, what causes his death is that he sees Cassian, and all of that, rage builds up, and he goes and does something stupid. But had he not seen Cassian, I think he would have died there in the middle. Like, Stormtrooper wouldn't have shot him, because he thought he was just, someone else, part of a Gorman. So anyways, just like those little things that I would have been able to like to see. So.
Yeah, I was shocked at that moment of Syrril attacking Dedra and then going out into the crowd to join the gore. I would never have expected him to have the chutzpah to attack her and realize that. But it's a quintessential moment of showing that he is completely changed now that he's had this revelation and he knows that he's doomed. Anyway, but that was something
and the whole time too, they found out there really wasn't a third party agitating the Gormans. It was all the Gormans, and it was all the Empire. And he realized, okay, this wasn't Cassian or Luthen. And then,
Yeah. Anyway, but that's not what this question is about. Question 2 is, what did you dislike? And for me, this is a bit esoteric. I was mildly disappointed with the way K2SO got reprogrammed and how that all worked out. I really, really thought that we were going to have B2 Emo put into his brain. And I even thought that right up until the last second, because the little technician wearing goggles that's talking to Cassian is all about, sometimes the brain doesn't work out right. And I'm just like, yeah, because it wasn't that droid's brain originally. It was originally the brain. Oh, no, never mind. I guess it's not. Anyway, but that wasn't the thing I disliked the most. This is a little weird, so stick with me. When Cassian went to the Force Healer, I wanted a bigger, more obvious movement of the Force. Like, I wanted there to be, I don't know, a tiny little glow as she tries to do the magic hand thing. Or maybe Cassian get this look on his face like, my arm, it feels perfect, that kind of thing. It was so subtle, almost to the point that I felt like did this really happen? But I understand the idea is it was supposed to be subtle, because it's like in that episode of Futurama where Bender meets God, and Bender's like, but you didn't do anything at all. And then God tells him, as the glowy stars out in the cosmos, that that's exactly what it means to be God, is that you make people wonder, did you really do anything at all? And so it's a point of Cassian, or Bix in this case, has to take it on faith that the Force Healer worked, or more importantly, that the Force Healer's statement about Cassian is a messenger, he has a destiny, that is supposed to be an affirmation from the light side, from the Force, that Cassian is like Derek was saying earlier, and Nathan then also a little later on in the beginning of our episode tonight, that these people are chosen by the Force to do some greater thing. And that's why the, super lethality of the stormtroopers, or even the awesome power of something like the Death Star, can't finish them off until they have completed their called for purpose by the Force. Whether that's Cassian's completing the delivery of the plans of the Death Star, and then the Death Star can finish him off, even though Krennic tried his darndest, and Syrril as well, amongst many other Imperials, to kill Cassian over the years. They could not do that until Cassian had finished his, destined purpose, right? Same with Leia, Luke, Han, Vader, Anakin, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and so on and so forth. But like with those other people that I just mentioned, it's a much flashier, more obvious way of the Force has chosen you, which is why you're able to make this 1 in a million shot to destroy the Death Star. The Force has chosen you, which is why you don't die even when you get chopped to pieces and literally burned almost to death on Mustafar. The Force has chosen you, which is why you don't get canceled, even though fans hate your initial midriff wearing appearance. Oh, sorry, that was Ahsoka. But the point is, I wanted Cassian to get his destined by the Force moment, where there's this little thing that appears above his head and is all
got
like
his ashes on his forehead, right? So
right, I want him to get his Palm Sunday, Ash Wednesday thing going. I want him to glow. I want maybe just. I think I did get a hint of John Williams' Force theme while our Force Healer was talking about it, which I guess should be enough for an old head Star Wars guy like me. But I just wanted one more moment of really definitive stuff. To me, I needed that not just because I like Star Wars to be bombastic and over the top, although Andor is not either of those things, but traditional Star Wars is. But also for Bix to have made the decision she made, you're called by the Force, I gotta get out of the way. I would like to have seen a more obvious moment of, yes, he sure is called by the Force, and you, woman, need to get out of the way while he goes and commits himself to being a paladin, or whatever the case may be. But we didn't get that. It felt a little unsatisfying. Now, I realize that, of course, in Rogue One, Cassian's imminent death from the Death Star on Scarif is like super duper bombastic, awesome. Oh gosh, look at the Force. I mean, hello, in case you missed it in Rogue One, Chirrut is around to remind you, I am one with the Force and the Force is with me. Pew, 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 pew. That's okay. They can't hit me until I do my thing. And, C-3PO and R2-D2 are the same way, of course, in the original Star Wars. Pew, 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 in the hallway of the Tantive V4. And, they can't hit us until we do our thing, etc. And, of course, also on Endor, 3PO and R2 get to just run through the crossfire. Everything's fine because the Force has chosen these droids. But I wanted it to be in concert with all of that stuff when we saw it on the episode where he was dealing with the Force Healer. Like, I didn't get it. And I'm kind of like, come on, Gilroy, give me just one little beacon of hope. I mean, you got this great line in the other episode, rebellions are built on hope. Come on, anyway. Okay.
I have something that might help your head canon on that, because this is what I think it was, Scott, because I'm with you. Do you think, though, the way you are perceiving it is because you're so used to the way the Jedi do it and how
sure,
they
of
are
course.
And all that?
Yeah,
so this is where I think is she's a Night Sister, and it's different.
Okay.
I think,
but even the light side Night Sisters
and it's not she's bad or anything, but it just looks different.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Different.
But like I was going to say, we saw light side sisters in Tales of the Jedi, right? The
Tales of the
animated series where
Empire, or was it
Tales of the Empire? Was it Tales of the Empire? Anyway, the one where
Yeah.
we saw the sisters wearing the blue robes,
Yes, yes.
and the grandmother was all like, "No, we have to be nonviolent. Don't go
Correct.
Don't
Yeah, we
go
don't use the
stealing
dark
weapons."
side. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
I'm
yeah,
just saying,
definitely.
I looked at it that way though. Like she's not trained as a Jedi to get those things though, right? Like I said,
But when the forgive my real world parlance, when the Wiccan girls are doing their stuff in the animated series, animated tales, we saw manifestations of the Force, like light energy came and she healed somebody with all the and so on. She did the magic hand thing. Grogu does the magic hand thing. Rey heals the worm in Rise of Skywalker. I get where you're coming from.
yeah, and
The
maybe she
Force
just
healer-
wasn't trained well enough. Again, it's been
Which I
almost,
feel like she wasn't trained at all. Yeah, because
Yeah,
she was like,
she's like-
sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
she's like the
Yeah.
Long Island median of Star Wars stuff.
Yes, she's the Long Island medium. Yes.
Caputo, Tracy Caputo, whatever her name is. So, what my wife likes to listen to. So
She's the ghost whisperer of Star Wars.
There you
All
go.
right, okay. Anyway, Nathan, what did you dislike
tried.
about these episodes?
All right,
I
well,
appreciate your efforts.
I'm going to go very meta here. This is not something about the episodes themselves. It's something about the Gilroys, both Tony and Dan, because they talked to Entertainment Weekly, and Tony said, "We are hijacking canon. In canon, she means Mon Mothma here, she's rescued by the Gold Squadron, and the speech that they give in the cartoon, which was a canonical show, is on that ship." And Danny's like, "Do I have to stick to this effing speech?" Apparently, they were not big fans of the cartoons, and they seem to think that they're for kids, which, granted, they are targeted at a slightly younger audience than Andor is, but I really enjoyed the cartoons, even as a kid. And I didn't appreciate their kind of talking down towards the cartoon. Now, I'm perfectly fine with them saying, "Hey, we wanted a more impactful speech, so we just made it to where she had two different speeches for two different audiences, both real-world audiences and in-universe audiences." That still makes sense. And, it still ties to canon. We'll talk a little bit more about that with our next question. But, yeah, I didn't really appreciate their take on Rebels.
Yeah, I agree with that. I saw that comment as well, and I was like, hey, but come on. Here in Disney's version of Lucasfilm, everything is canon. There are no levels of canon anymore. There's not, movie canon, TV show canon, book canon, game canon, comic book canon, and then G-level George Lucas canon. But apparently there is. And so I'm
I
disappointed.
like my
So-
Miwoks movies. We all appreciate.
I know, right? Anyway, I think I'm with you, Nathan. I'm disappointed that we secretly do still have the levels of canon, and we're going to look down on animated or.
But they're all
and
grumpy
I'm sure
men.
They were old grumpy men. To Gilroy, Tony and his brother are of the age where they would definitely tell you the movies of something like Star Trek have more weight than a random episode of Deep Space Nine or Voyager. I could hear them saying that if they somehow got connected to Paramount and were going to make a Star Trek movie, right? Couldn't you guys hear them saying that? It's like, wow, I'm not going to be limited to the original origin of the Talaxian species from episode 7 of season 3 of Voyager.
Well, and certainly I could see them saying, I'm not going to pay attention to Lower Decks.
Well, I was going to say Lower Decks doesn't do cartoons any credit. I mean, we love them. We love them. But...
No, you might love them. It's fine if you like them. That is not the Star Trek.
I'm still saying, I'm still not giving
okay.
any credit, though, is all I'm saying. It's not giving cartoons credit.
I was fine with Lower Decks until someone pointed out to me that they are supposed to be canon. I'm like, what? Hold on. A lot of this makes
somehow most of the time that's impossible.
Yeah. But this isn't a Star Trek podcast, so moving on.
But I agree with you about that point of the real world complaint there, Nathan. So I would like to see all of canon remain, just like Disney said it would. But I have to remind myself that the House of Mouse made that announcement in 2012 when they bought the Lucasfilm and they excised all the old EU. I mean, we're already 13 years into the whole everything now must be canon. I would not be surprised at all if they had to redo it again. I mean, I kind of hope they do, because with all the Marvel comics that have come out since that time, even an old-time comic book nerd like me hasn't been able to keep up with it all. And you run into the Marvel problem, the Marvel Cinematic Universe problem of well, we can't actually write this story because something back here in 1999 makes it where this character cannot be in this spot. We already saw Gilroy have to deal with this. Remember the problem he had when he was writing for Rogue One, you guys, about the Death Star?
Refresh.
Wedge Antilles could not be involved in the Battle of Scarif, even though he was around as a member of the rebellion, because in A New Hope, it's the first time that Wedge ever saw the Death Star. Yeah. And he's, look at the size of this thing. Well, if he had been at the Battle of Scarif, he'd have already known how big the thing was. And so on and so forth. And I remember specifically that instance being brought up because some fan or journalist fan asked Gilroy about that. And he was like, Lucasfilm executives told us you can't have Wedge for this movie. And we were like, why not? And that's the reason they gave us. And we were just
That's pretty good, valid reason, though.
It is a valid reason. Yeah, for sure.
For us, because there have been other nerds like us that have been taking it apart then, right? So
I would have been like, how come Wedge was surprised at the... I mean, and we could have had some really contrived shooting of the space battle where Wedge never quite gets around the side of Scarif, the planet. He's always on the wrong side to see the... Like, he and the Death Star are
Wedge is just in the first group to jet out of there.
That's it. Yeah, Wedge led the evacuation. Yeah. He was all like, okay, we got to go. And seconds later, we had a moment. We had a moment like that in... sorry, go ahead, Nathan. I'll hold my thought.
Something similar happened with the Clone Wars, because in Revenge of the Sith, it's the first time that Anakin and Grievous see each other, because Grievous talked about how I thought you would be taller. So throughout the Clone Wars, they never see each other. They only have one scene together, and they are both unconscious and pass each other going the opposite directions. Dave Filoni did that on purpose, because he's like, no, they canonically cannot have seen each other at any point up until Revenge of the Sith.
And to me, that's just attention to detail. I appreciate that kind of stuff, right? You know what I mean? So
as a writer, I could see Gilroy was upset about that with Rogue One, and then later he was all like, I'm not again, when they told him that he had to change the speech, He was all like, I've been nursing this grudge for 10 years.
But they've already rewritten a bunch of stuff, right? I mean, like, obviously the Ahsoka book had some moments with the couple of scenes in there that we got from Tales of the Jedi in that one episode. And then obviously they've redone Chuck Wendig stuff.
I'm okay with that.
Which we're okay, which obviously Cobb Vanth got, and obviously that was well received. So, but yeah, I get it. But to be fair, that was a cruddy book versus, live action stuff. So, but yes.
Well,
that goes back to the tiers of canon.
Tiers of canon. Yeah. Tiers of canon. One other time that happened was in Mandalorian season 2, when Luke Skywalker showed up to rescue Grogu. Seconds before Luke Skywalker arrives, Boba Fett and Slave One have to, for some reason, hyperspace, jump out of there, because what the heck would have happened if Luke was there and then Bo-Katan was like, "Hey, Boba Fett, bring in the Slave One for us to get back up." And Luke would have been like, "I'm sorry, who?
Where?
I'm sorry, what? I saw
I've
that
got
guy
a grudge.
Die. Yeah, I got a bone to pick with him, and I thought he was eaten by the Sarlacc. What's going on? Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Question. Speaking of, I thought he was eaten by the Sarlacc. Question number 3: what connections did you draw to the rest of the Star Wars galaxy? I have a very nitpicky one that I really liked. During the scene where the media liaison for the Senate is trying to shut down the signal so that Mon Mothma's speech is not broadcast to the galaxy at large, he eventually runs down to the literal control box for the transmitter, and these two maintenance people show up, one of whom is an obvious cyborg, and he has these cool, very 1980s or maybe early 90s cyberpunk sunglass looking things with the vented lenses that are his optical implants, and then he's got kind of like a head computer thing a la Lobot, right? That exact arrangement of having the thingy back here and then the vented eye implants is one that you can choose when customizing your cyborg race character on Star Wars The Old Republic MMO, of which I have had many guys with the 1980s sunglasses optical implants as cyborgs. And I was just like, hey, I was doing my best Leonardo DiCaprio. Hey, it's that thing, And so I loved, that was my favorite, connection to other Star Wars properties. All right. Nathan, what do you got?
All right, well, I'm going to go with the big obvious, and that is Gold Squadron. We hear that Gold Squadron is taking Mon Mothma to Yavin, that they want to change the narrative and have it be that Gold Squadron brought her in, and they did that so that Rebels would make sense. That's the story that we get there. Yep. And if you watch towards the end of season 3 of Rebels, you can go directly from episode 9 into an episode of Rebels.
Nice.
Just time wise, fits perfectly. So despite the fact that they were all, do we have to use this effing speech? They did make sure that this episode worked within Rebels canon.
Yeah. So they sort of they reached a compromise, something the Senate couldn't do in that particular scene within universe.
Right.
All right, Nathan. Derek. What do you got?
So obviously there's quite a bit with all the character movement on Yavin, right? So you got all that stuff going on. But my favorite was, I don't have one in front of me right now. I forgot to grab it, but I loved when they were setting up the barricades around the office. They're the barricades from Legion.
They are. I noticed that too.
These are official Star Wars universe barricades.
So everyone on the Star Wars Legion Facebook page were like freaking out. They're like, "Oh my god!" And I loved how they made the security droids like so badass. That was so cool. They were just like hulking everyone out and just throwing them around, and and so everybody's just like, yeah, we need these, So in the game, I mean, there's obviously some with the riot control squad that they have, but anyways, that was like the first thing I said. I was like, oh, there's the barricades, and they're painted black. Sweet.
Official Star Wars barricades. And then what I liked was the admiral guy or captain, the captain that was there to give orders to all the Navy troops in their freshly starched.
The crisis management guy, or the grizzled guy?
No, the dude who had the scar on his face.
That was the crisis management guy. Yeah.
The one who was there as the official Navy commander, but really he told Dedra, "I'm the trigger, but you're the finger. You got to tell me when to execute." He made the recruits move the barricades around 3 or 4 different times for no apparent reason, because remember, it was just all a setup to get all those young men killed. So he kept giving them this dumb busy work that would leave them dangerously exposed, on purpose, of course. But it was all like, move those barricades. Good. Now that you're done moving those barricades, let's move those barricades. I need a tunnel. I need actually a protection. I need you to open the doors. What are you doing? I told you to do this. What? But we just moved these barricades.
But we need a path to the monument. But why?
They're the sacrificial to the altar.
Yep. Yeah, totally. All right. Question 4. I believe Nathan had question 4. Yeah.
All right. So Syrril, in my opinion, the standout character of episode 8, or one of them. Honestly, there were a few. But what do we think about Syrril? Was he lowering his weapon right before he got shot? And if so, what does that tell us about him? Why did he lower his weapon?
I think he was lowering the rifle because Cassian had said, "Who are you?" And Syrril was just completely and totally shocked. Shocked, not back to his senses, because at this point in his life, he has completely lost it. He's beaten up his girlfriend. He's broken up with his girlfriend. He's left the Empire behind. And then he saw Cassian and tried to kill him with his bare hands. I mean, tried to rip him apart with his bare hands, because he's been obsessed with revenge on this guy for the past, I don't know how many years it would have been
4
at this
years.
point, 2, 3, 4 years, right? Can you imagine hating somebody for, quote, ruining your life for a solid 4 years? And then he got there, and right as he's about to get his revenge, He's going to blast Cassian's face off with that rifle, Cassian's own rifle, and ruining the moment. Cassian looks at him and says, "Who are you?" Because he's not thought 1 second about Syrril since that stuff that happened on Ferrix. He might not have even really realized that Syrril was there. In fact,
he might have thought he was a Gorman the way he was dressed.
Yeah, exactly. And so that just shocks Syrril to his core, where he's just like, "What do you mean? I've been obsessed with you and getting revenge on you, and you don't even know who I am?" And then he slightly lowers the gun. I think given a couple more seconds, he still would have shot Cassian, but this time out of straight up rage. Not that you ruined my life, but how dare you disrespect me and not know who I am? But he was going, I think, to take a second to say, "I'm Syrril Karn, the guy whose life you destroyed by being a worthless rebel. And I'm the one who finally killed you, not any of the Imperials who are all a bunch of, inept, corrupt morons." Blam. But he didn't get to do any of that because Drina's dad comes around the corner, sees Cassian in trouble, and shoots Syrril in the head. Like, that's the second time in Andor we've seen somebody take a blaster bolt in the head, because Saw Gerrera shot Pluty in the head, and then now Syril's been shot in the head. You don't see a whole lot of headshots in other Star Wars live-action media. Some video games, yes. Obviously, if you're playing Battlefront 2 or one of those games, you can do your own headshots, but, yeah, I think he was lowering his weapon, but because of the sheer disrespect and just absolutely blown away of, "For you, it was the day Cassian Andor came to your planet to do this rebellion operation. For Cassian, it was a Tuesday."
Yep. I thought of that quote too. There were three things I thought of. One was that. Another was the Princess Bride, because he sounded a lot like Inigo Montoya asking the Man in Black, "Who are you?"
Yeah. Yes. No good. I've known too many Spaniards. Anyway.
No one of importance. It's like, I must know. We'll get used to disappointment. And then the third one is The Axe Forgets from season 1 is an episode title. The whole point there is that the tree remembers, but the axe forgets. In this case, Cassian is the axe. He has forgotten who Syrril is, and it does not matter to him one whit. But Syrril, in this case, being the tree, remembers and cannot forget, cannot forgive, and he brings that pain with him through the next several years, and it really ruins his life in a lot of ways.
Actually, I thought Syrril was better off from this because, one, he got to go back and he got to work for the ISB, which, to Deidre's point, they were going to go back and be heroes because of the 2 years that they spent putting together this ploy, basically getting what Director Krennic and the Emperor wanted. And he got a hot banging girlfriend out of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, I don't know what he needs to be pissed about. Otherwise, he did find out that he is on the bad guy side. But
the whole hot, crazy scale.
Barney Stinson, hot, crazy Matrix? No, what is it? Continuum.
She's way off into the crazy side of it. All right.
Yeah.
Wow. And I think in the end, Syrril would have been better off if many years ago, when his boss told him, "Just forget this," if he just had. Mm-hmm. He may not have had the fancy job.
To be fair, we wouldn't have Cassian now, but we wouldn't have Cassian then either.
That's true.
Everything.
The Empire would have been better off.
Yes.
Probably. Luthen would have never gotten Cassian. Who knows where things would have gone? To be fair, we don't know, right? That could have been a what if story if they ever would pursue that Star Wars.
One guy refuses to look the other way once, and the whole empire crumbles.
Force works in mysterious ways, right? So,
anyway, Derek, what's your answer though? Do you think he was lowering the gun?
I could go either way, where he was going to lower his gun to tell him to do the whole monologue and I'm Syrril, right? Like you said, I was there when blah, blah, blah. But I also think, don't they still kind of think at this point, unless if I missed something, because again, just been trying to soak in so much the past several weeks. Don't they still think that Cassian is potentially access? Yes, thank you.
At this point, the ISB is definitive that Cassian is not Axis. They don't know that Luthen is Axis, but they know that Cassian got his orders from somebody else.
Okay. But I was going to say, because to me at that point, like, I think he was trying to then capture him. He would capture him and bring him in alive and say, like, here's your third party. Because to that point, he is now, you could, in theory, relate that there was a third party involvement, right? Up to this point, Syrril thought that there wasn't, right? I mean, he was even trying to make a last-ditch effort on whatever the one other daughter's name, and she just kind of like slaps him and walks off on him. That they're trying to still think that there's a third party involved here, right?
And he knows this guy ain't Gorman.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So obviously that's the whole point where he just, like I said, if he hadn't seen Cassian, he would have died with the Corman. If he saw Cassian, he still died with the Corman. But
maybe so. I think at this point in time, Syrril has gone full native, as they say. And
very well could have.
He wants to be Gorman, and he wants to help them fight the Empire because now he feels betrayed not just by the security forces, but betrayed by the whole Empire. Once he found out that basically Dedra and Partagast were Partagast and Dedra's boss were using him, and I think now he's been so in deep undercover with the Gormans that he's all like, you know what, they kind of have a point.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Like I said, but I also still feel like he could have been like, here, there is a third party involved, and it would have made him feel better and gone back at that point. So, like I said,
maybe he was lowering the gun because he planned to capture him, or we didn't see it, but he was fiddling for the stun option so that he could
maybe either way. If Syrril wasn't shot, Cassian would have either been dead or captured. Is how I look at it.
Yeah, definitely. But again, the Force made it so that he could not be stopped until he completes his destiny. All right. Question number 5, Derek.
All right. So mine's a 2-part question. So for the last of the 3 episodes of the series, first, make a final prediction of which you're 99% confident will happen, or at least feel very good about. And then on the second prediction, and again, you can do it either swap. I don't care if it's, flip-flop it. And then make a second prediction that you feel less confident about 1%, right? Something far left field that you think could still happen, but you're really stretching it here, guys.
All right. Nathan, what do you got?
All right. Well, I'm going to start with my 1%, the thing that I don't think is going to happen, but theoretically could, and that is a full-on cameo from the Rebels crew. Like we see the Ghost, we see all the Rebels, and they are somehow plot relevant. So a little bit more than just a cameo, more than just we hear General Syndulla on the comms or something like that. More than just we see the Ghost in a flyby. Like we actually see Hera and Zeb.
Do we get Kanan?
All of them.
More than Zeb is drinking in the bar in the background.
Right. Is Kanan alive at this point that he can make a cameo?
It depends on when they said it.
Because it's the year. Well, see, it's weird because everything's been like a year, and this was 2 years before. So this is supposed to be 1 year.
This is supposed to be 1 year before.
But then the way they made it sound like is it's supposed to literally end going into Rogue One almost.
It might, yeah. That's why I say it depends on when they said it as to whether Kanan would be there or not.
Well, make your 1% prediction. Which version do you think we get? Kanan or no Kanan?
No Kanan. I predict no Kanan.
Okay.
So that's the 1% prediction because I don't really think it's going to happen, in part because of what we talked about earlier with how they treat Rebels. All right. Not going to happen. The 99% is lots of death. Most of the characters that we have. I'm going to call one out specifically. Wilmon dies in a Rhydonium explosion.
Okay. I would have said Wilmon dies in the bed of some new woman because dang, my guy gets around.
Look, I'm not saying that he's not going to take some new woman with him when he goes. But
that could be how he goes.
I think Saul shows back up.
Could be. Takes
Wilmon, and they go off, and he has Wilmon try to get some more Rhydonium, and kaboom.
All right. Okay, my 99%. I'm almost positive this is going to happen. Dedra Meero defects to the rebellion because, God, did you guys see her when she felt like she was being choked by her own uniform? Come on.
Are you saying
I
that
loved.
she's choking on her own aspiration?
You know what I really loved? Somebody online I believe it was on Threads, was pointing out how they were so happy that we got a traditional Star Wars, the Imperial officer is getting choked for their failure, but this wasn't via the Force, and it wasn't even via somebody else. She felt the weight of her own decisions, failure, and just banality of evil choking her. The uniform itself became a symbol of oppression, even to the person wearing it. I was just like jumping up and down at the symbolism there as a writer. I'm like, yes, this is what's up. And so I think that she very much had a mea culpa moment where she had to deal with everything she just lost. The one man in her life that was into her, and even though she hates Syril's mom, they were still like interacting, and of course her career, feeling that what she was doing had meaning and she was bringing order to the galaxy, and instead she found out that she was just bringing more death and destruction because she's working for the dark side. And I think she just knows it like instinctively now. So yeah, there was no Sith choking her, but maybe the Force was choking her to get her attention. And she was like trying to tear that collar off. Oh man, I could go on and on about priests and collars and whatnot, but I'll save you the spiel. That's the scene that tells us by the time we get to 1 year before the Battle of Yavin, I think Dedra is going to be like way on deep into the rebellion of, oh my gosh, I have to help stop this. And she might even be instrumental in getting them access to the information about where to get the plans for the Death Star. She might be somehow bumping up against Galen Erso and helps him to figure out, here's what we got to do. And then she helps him surreptitiously get that message out through Bodhi Rook and so on and so forth. I don't know for sure about all those details, but I think she's going to swap sides. She's going to be our Agent Callus for Star Wars Andor, to make another reference to Rebels. Now, my 1%er. Luthen Rael is a Jedi who has been retired since Order 66, and in a climactic scene, he is going to have to buy time for his assistant and perhaps Cassian himself to escape from some particular Imperial trap, and we will see Luthen whip out the lightsaber and noble sacrifice his way through the last moments of his time as a member of the
Royal Guards.
Maybe he'll fight Royal Guards. Maybe he'll fight an Inquisitor. Maybe he'll fight Darth Vader. Some way or another. I think he's whipping out the lightsaber and he's buying time for Cassian or his assistant or both of them to escape.
I would give you slightly better odds for him not being a Jedi, but still whipping out a lightsaber, because he just has one. It
probably has more than one.
He runs an antique shop. So
yeah,
like the Royal Guards will bust in and he'll be like, well, yeah, at least I got this. Do you know how to use that? No.
Put shiny end toward enemy. I'm good. So that, but see, that's what makes it my 1% prediction. He's not only got the saber, but he is a Jedi. In fact, I think it would be awesome if he was a former Jedi librarian, and so he either worked with
an artifice.
Yeah, exactly. He worked with, or he worked alongside, or he even worked before Jocasta Nu. And so once she died, he took over, or he was an assistant, or maybe he had the job before her, something like that. And so that's why he's so good at tracking down the relics and the artifacts and the artwork. And, he knows the province of them because, well, he's been studying them for all this time. I think that the crazy lasers out the side of his ship that looked like lightsabers was a hint back in season 1. And of course, all these artifacts, like there's stuff in there that I just know was in the Jedi Temple at some point. All right, Derek, what do you got for your predictions?
Well, Scott, you stole a little bit of my thunder, a little bit. So
I'm good like that.
So my 99% is that we are going to have Luthen and Dedra have a final showdown. And that's how both are basically going to end up dead, because they're both going to end up killing each other in this, right? But we're going to have some really good monologue and all that stuff. So that's what I'm really predicting. My 1%, though, is that we will find out that Luthen is Dedra's father. And Dedra has been was because how she said she was orphaned and raised in the Imperial boundary and all that because Luthen planted her there, whatever 30 some years ago.
Wow.
And
now
you
that's
thought,
committed to the cause.
And why did he plant her there? Because he would have been kicked out of the Jedi Order if he knew that he had a relationship.
Amazeballs.
So,
all right, if all of that connects, that'll be just incredible.
But yeah, I do that because we're made to think that Lonnie is the only ISB sleeper agent he has, but it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, so. I love the idea there that Luthen sacrificed his own daughter to stop the Empire because it adds more weight to his whole speech to Lonnie about I'm forced to use the plans of the methods of my enemies, blah blah blah, sunrise I will never see, etc. Really great monologue from season 1 there. Dang, I thought Saw Gerrera was crazy for his stance on how to be a member of the rebellion, but if Luthen is like sacrificing his own kids as pawns, yeah, that's amazeballs. Well, if any of those things happen, you guys can be sure that we'll talk about them here on a future episode of What a Piece of Junk. But before we finish up this episode, let's do Derek's favorite part of the show, and that is what Star Wars shirt are we wearing this week? Or, other Star Wars merch. Derek, what do you got?
Well, as I mentioned, for Happy Mother's Day.
Oh, cool. Padme.
Hey.
Yes, with her
mother of the twins. Well, yeah, with the midriff. This is sexy MILF. So
that's right. There you go. Her her midriff and holding a blaster, and in my opinion, to really round out that whole "I'm going to be sexy with my blaster" cape, because you got to have a cape if you're going to look cool in Star Wars.
Very cool.
Things I learned from Lando. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Hey,
I dig it.
Yeah. So,
anyways, all right, Nathan, what do you got?
Right. Well, I bought some stuff for May the 4th from her universe, and one thing
you did
was
you did crack down that last 2 hours.
This hat,
cute, the Grogu hat, the child,
and then I realized this is like my third Grogu hat, but I'm okay with that.
One for every day of the week,
as long as we only have 3 days in a week.
Well, you have other hats.
You're on your way there.
Yeah,
you're progressing toward.
I do have other Star Wars hats and other hats in general, but yeah, this gives me 3.
See, to
Grogu
me,
hats.
In your particular case, the black cowboy hat counts as a Star Wars hat because
absolutely,
the Dave Filoni thing.
And technically, it's a Grogu hat because he helps. I mean, he didn't actually create Grogu, but he did.
Yeah. See,
so
you're well on your way.
The next couple of weeks, I'll have a couple other items, but today I've just got the hat.
Very cool. You are wearing a Star Wars shirt too, I think.
I am. Yes,
it is Mandalorian, or just helmets.
It is just helmets. Yeah. So we've got a few Mandalorian ones. We've got Tech over here. We've got
several clone troopers.
Yeah, several clone troopers. Boba Fett's down here, and my favorite, the clone trooper with the Ahsoka helmet.
Yep. 322, right? Or is it 332? 332? Yeah, 332 battalion.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, I am doing a oldie but a goodie, which is also a pun because it's me. It's Juan Solo from the Mexican restaurant Chuy's over in Charlotte, but they are a chain, so you can find them lots of places. And I love that in the background there is a Chuy's in one of the dome buildings on Tatooine. And of course, Juan Solo is holding not blasters, but chili peppers because, well, you will never find a more wretched hive of spice and savory. Anyways, if you guys out there want your own cool What a Piece of Junk t-shirt or mouse pad or coffee mug or iPad case, please head over to the Fandom Podcast Network TeePublic store over at teepublic.com and search up Fandom Podcast Network in the search bar, and you'll find all kinds of stuff for What a Piece of Junk or any of the other great shows here on the Fandom Podcast Network. And also, if you're out there searching up FPN, you can find all the places where you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, so on and so forth. And you can find the podcast available for download just about anywhere that there is a podcast available. And please, if you find us on a service like Apple Podcasts or Google Play that lets you leave a review, give us a 5-star review, because that really helps us get the word out about the show. We've been doing this for a number of years. Derek and I actually started this podcast before the pandemic. So we're not one of those Johnny-come-lately crew that did it because they were sitting around the house with nothing else to do while voluntarily hanging out and hoping to quarantine to get through all of that. No. We were professional enough to start it before.
That's how I got at it.
That is true. Nathan had nothing else to do, and I was like, "Hey, well, why don't you go?" Do the show?
It works. It works. You know. So
yeah, totally. All right. Well, anyways, thank you very much for joining us on this episode, everyone. Let us know between episodes what we could do to make the show better, what you like, what you don't like, so on and so forth, and we will do our best to take your suggestions under consideration. But until next time, please always remember to respect each other and always respect each other's fandom. All right, Nathan, punch it.